Isn't it how like how these softwares kind of they're very popular, and then they're just kind of, I don't know, they're just kind of disappear, because there's no reason why Skype shouldn't continue to be good. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I feel like, especially with technology changing so quickly, like even look at TikTok. I didn't know what that was 2 years ago. Now everybody uses it and has it. And before that, it was like Vine, Snapchat. It's just kind of whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
People are just like very, like they only focus on something for a few minutes and it's the next best thing and whatever's cool.
Yeah.
So like, I don't even know if they can keep up anymore.
No. You've got to, that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to keep up. If you don't, you get left behind. That's the problem. So
the cool thing was I was using Zoom. I've been using it for probably about 2 years just for work and different things that I do. And so there wasn't a huge transition for me to using Zoom.
Okay.
But holding online events, that's going to be the next question, is how do you hold online events? Like I've done one and I'm doing another one in a few weeks. And it's interesting to try how you engage people in an online setting.
Sure. Events in which way? Which kind of, you mean any events, or you just mean kind of a conference kind of event, or?
Well, actually, about a month ago, I did attend an online conference that was really good. As far as my work goes, I do coaching, and so I'll do like retreats.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to have one at the end of June in person.
Sure.
And we're moving that virtual. And so I've got to figure out, how do I have 30 people that I was going to do a retreat with, like for professional growth? How do I make that interesting, engaging in an online setting?
Right. Okay. Which is tough, isn't it? Because I talked about this the other day with somebody, that it's difficult to kind of connect on a really human level, not in person. There's something always missing, but I guess you've got to strive to get that connection somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, so as I was saying, I went to a conference a month ago, and it was called Running Remote, and it was supposed to be here in Austin, Texas, where I live. And I think it was supposed to be in April. And so last minute, they said, obviously, we can't hold it, so we're going to move it online. And so they found this platform called Hopin.
Right.
And it was a great platform. I really enjoyed it because they had like the main stage where they had a speaker that would come on and kind of do the plenary type sessions. Then they had the breakout sessions, and they had some running concurrently. So if you want to learn about one topic, it was all about remote work. So if you want to learn about HR and remote work, go to the session. If you want to learn about taxes and remote work, go to the session. And then they had like an exhibitor area where you could go and see people that had sponsored the conference. And my favorite thing was the networking room, because it was kind of like chat roulette. But you'd get, I think it was 3 minutes that you got, and you didn't know who was going to come up, and they would just come up and be like, oh, hey. And they had like their LinkedIn link and their Twitter and their website. So you could immediately like click on that and connect with them. And it was actually perfect because you really only needed 3 minutes to like network with someone. And then it wasn't like a typical networking event where you just kind of stand there awkwardly with your drink and look around to see who you're going to talk to next. Yes. So I actually liked it better.
Yeah, because I guess you're forced, aren't you? In that situation, you're forced to speak to that person. And I guess in a room full of people, you pick and choose actually based on visual, which is interesting. Yeah.
There were a few people I met where I was like, wow, this 3 minutes is a long time. Because, you always have those kind of awkward, like, I don't know if I would have talked to you in real life. But then there were some where I don't know that I would have gone up to them in a room, but we had a great conversation.
Sure.
And the other thing, too, was the speakers were all in the networking room. So you know how sometimes at a conference there's like this crush and you don't get to talk to the speaker?
Yeah.
I actually got to have, 3 minutes or so just talking about their session and learning more about them. So I liked that you had access. It was a little more egalitarian than some of the other conferences that you go to.
Yeah. It sounds really good, actually. I hadn't kind of thought about that kind of breakaway kind of session. It sounds really, really interesting. I'm just, my head's ticking over now of how you could use that in a lot of different other areas as well. No, that's really cool. What was the name of that platform? Hopin.
Remote.
Oh, right, okay.
Actually, that's the name of the company. I think the name of the conference itself was called Remote Aid.
Right.
And like I said, it was supposed to be here in Austin, and then they had to just flip everything online very, very quickly. And I think they did a really excellent job. And then this week I went to an online conference using the same platform that was for cryptocurrency nerds.
Yeah.
I count myself one of the nerds, kind of. So they were using the same platform though, and they had even stepped it up above that. Like they had a really nice setting for their speakers, and like an MC, and so I can see how people are now kind of learning and iterating on how to make these engaging.
Sure. And do you think this is, I know people talk about it a lot, but is this the new normal? Is this where we're going, do you think?
Yeah, it's there's so many words that we keep using right now, like pivoting and the new normal and unprecedented, right? There's like all these words that we keep using. And I don't know, like, what is normal? Like, that's the question I would throw back to someone is, what do you consider normal? Because throughout history, we see where there are these pivot points where suddenly something happens, whether it was 100 years ago with Spanish flu or 9/11 here in the US, like, there are different those points, like inflection points, where suddenly reality splinters off and goes a different direction.
Sure.
So I think we are in one of those moments right now, but I don't know what normal is going to look like. What do you think?
I don't know. I think this could be something that's going to be in our life now for quite a while. But I don't, for me personally, for my kind of the way that I feel and live my life, I'm not 100% comfortable with us as a society being pushed into into kind of a non-contact sport, if you know what I mean. It doesn't sit that well with me. I think it's great to use, for example, for what we're doing now is brilliant because there's no way that we can connect across an ocean without doing this. So that's great. But for people who you could actually kind of speak to and see and touch and smell, and I don't know, the human instinct side is it's a worry for me that we're not going to be connecting like that anymore, for a while at least.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting just to see what happens as far as, I mean, it impacts so many different aspects of life, right? Like young people, they're going to be homeschooled essentially. I mean, I was homeschooled and I turned out pretty normal. But then there's like the dating side, like how do you do dating and networking? Like I do coaching and I've been doing a lot of career coaching, and I had people saying, how do I network? How do I network with people to find a job and not just send a blind resume? So there's all these things that are going to be impacted that we don't ultimately know what it's going to look like on the other side, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I think things like applying for jobs, as you say, applying for jobs and things like that, it's more, I feel that it's maybe more, it comes across as more difficult, but I actually think that you can really, if you get in, there's a lot of jobs where you would have applied without seeing or speaking to the person. And so maybe this kind of new way of working is pushing people to sit in front of each other now and have that discussion, which is 100 times better than a CV on a piece of paper or a resume on a piece of paper. So, I don't know. Do you think it's gonna last? This is gonna last, and it's gonna become kind of the new way of interacting with people? Do you think that it will overtake kind of person to person interaction or not? Or do you think we'll eventually move back to that contact again?
Well, based on the interactions I'm having with people, because I do work with organizations that have like big conferences and meetings, and like my full-time job that I do right now is I do coaching for nonprofits. And so we do a lot of events like retreats, trainings. We have a big conference every year, which we just had to move virtual, right? Because it's supposed to be in Chicago, which we can't have an event there right now. So what I'm hearing from people is they want things to return to normal in the sense that yes, people still want to travel. They still want to go out and have interactions and go to yoga classes and go have a drink with a friend. But I think people are more open now to, like I was traveling every 10 days for work. That's a lot. Yeah, I was starting to get tired. This has actually been a really great break for me. I've really enjoyed that. So I would love to see moving forward, maybe we don't travel as much for work. Maybe we can do things like this online where we can find those connections. But I don't think it's ever going to fully replace in person, because what I'm hearing from people is I want a hybrid, like not travel so much, but I still want to go places occasionally. Yeah. Because there are some things you just can't replace.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you've kind of semi-changed my mind a little bit now, because you're right. Actually, if we can hybridize it a little bit, and because I know you're not the only person that I've spoken to who said that it's been just a break from that kind of real intense going to the office or kind of now it has been a break where if you want to take, I don't know, if you want to take 20 minutes to go and have a coffee and maybe read a bit of a book, or it's kind of it's an opportunity to use your own time now. Whereas before it was really, really controlled by whoever you're working for or whatever circumstances you work in. So maybe, maybe it's a case of mixing the two. But I think things like, for example, yoga, there's a lot, I guess it's the same over there. Over here, there's a lot of online yoga sessions going on, workout sessions where instead of so it is replacing going to the studio or going to the gym, and you do it at home following somebody online. Do you think those sorts of recreational things might be replaced, or do you think people will go back to going out of the house to go and do it?
Well, it's interesting because I think over the last few years, we've seen a trend towards people wanting to do stuff in their home anyway. So if you look at like Peloton, which is that crazy popular biking system that everyone has, there's that. There's also a really cool company called Mirror. And it's like like a 4-foot long rectangle type mirror. It's a camera, but it's a screen. And so it's like you can see your instructor doing videos in front of you, and you can follow along in the mirror looking at yourself.
Right.
So these were all things that were kind of coming into vogue. And I think it was because this is just the interesting thing about this whole pandemic is we were reaching a point where people were getting so burned out about like 24/7, run, work, all that kind of stuff. Now we've been forced to be at home. And like you said, people now can like take time to do yoga and think about things. So I think that trend was already kind of going towards being at home, but it was because they didn't have time to go to a gym. They were so overwhelmed and busy. But now it's like you have to be home. So take advantage of the fact that you can do Peloton or Mirror or these classes or yoga online.
And also, I think a funny thing as well is that when people are at the office, they don't work 100% to their kind of potential, using all the time kind of effectively and everything else. When they're at home, that time where they would have been maybe having a little quick look at the phone, maybe going to the water cooler, whatever else, now is taken up by doing a yoga session, so actually they're using that time a lot more effectively and still getting the job done, basically.
Because see, that's my passion. And over the last few years, I've worked from home for almost a decade now. Like I said, I was homeschooled before that. So like I've kind of always known how to just work at home, which is a discipline. It's something you do have to learn how to do, because some people are like, oh my God, I just want to watch Netflix all day. So you do have to kind of set up the parameters and your systems and all that. So I was already in the process of becoming a professional coach. And when all this happened, I thought, okay, I need to turn around and help people and show them how they can work at home effectively. So I have a newsletter right now that I send out. It's all about how to lead a remote team effectively. And then also I really focus on conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is all about not just doing what's best for you and for maximizing your profits, which is what a lot of companies are all about right now. It's about how are you giving back? How are you enriching the lives of your employees? How are you giving back to your community, the planet? And really getting to know yourself as a person so you can be the best leader possible. So I am all about that. And it's interesting that because of this pandemic, it's like we've all been forced to go home, like have a timeout almost, and just think about what is my life about, what I want to do. And I hope that people are taking advantage of this opportunity. And it sounds like many are.
Yeah, I think they are. Because I think it gives people an opportunity as well to, as you say, to think about what they want to do moving forward, which maybe they didn't have before. And maybe that was part of the design of the system that we've lived in up to this moment, is you don't want people thinking too much, because then they realize, actually, I can work from home, I can do my own thing. I think it's really going to benefit people having that alone time to think and to plan what they're going to do, because let's face it, we live with kind of the real rat race that we live in. We kind of, there are a lot of unhappy people out there, aren't there, who really struggle. And so maybe this is the time to do it. And for example, with the work that you do, it's a really good kind of initiative for people to look into what it would be like to lead a team rather than go into work and being part of a team or whatever else. So no, I like the way that your work's going, really. Can you tell me a little bit more about the retreats? Because I had a look on your website and I found the retreats really interesting and maybe something. I think it's focused more towards women. Am I right?
Yeah, so I do, different kinds of things. I have a lot of different interests when it comes to coaching, but one of the things that's really on my heart is giving women, especially professional women, the chance to step back and go someplace fun, which now that the pandemic has hit, we'll have to see how this is moving forward. But maybe going to an exotic place you haven't gone before, because travel is so good for you. It gets you out of your, your little usual circle that you're in, your little sphere, and step back and see things from a different perspective. And also, it's all about, like I said, the conscious leadership, figuring out who you are as a person, what your purpose is here, how you want to give back. And so there's really nothing more powerful than having a group of women come together who maybe are struggling in their careers or in their life, and then figuring out, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? How do I want to give back? Because life is so much more than just your job. It's about who you are and what you bring to the world. Why were you sent here? And so in those retreats, I help women figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's great to have group. I do think it's great to have kind of a women only retreat, or I mean, the way that's structured, it's great. However, in currently in the times that we live in, people are starting to merge those kind of, they're not boundaries, but saying, okay, so if men can do it, women can do it, and if women can do it, men can do it. But I thoroughly believe that we are separate, we're different creatures, we are almost a different species at times, but we can coexist on the same level. But so for women, it's great to get away with other women where they can feel comfortable, where they fully understand each other. And I think it's a really, really great thing to do for the women. So and kind of what does it entail? What things do they do on the retreat? Hopefully, when it gets back to normal.
Yeah. So usually, what we do is, retreats are all about, like I said, stepping back from the normal.
Sure.
And so a lot of times that means like giving yourself downtime. Like I know people I work with that it's like 24/7. They're just answering the phone, typing, just on the computer. This is a chance to step back from that and have those quiet, peaceful moments that kind of like what we're experiencing right now, this lockdown and being at home. But a lot of like individual coaching, so finding out like what is your specific goal in life, what do you want to accomplish, what is your passion and your purpose, and then becoming more aligned with that. But also group sessions too, because as you know, like when we have group sessions, group conversations are so powerful because you feel less alone. Like, oh, they're struggling with that too, so am I. So it's one-on-one coaching, but also group coaching, but also time for reflection where they can actually spend time alone, journaling, contemplating big questions that we throw at them to figure out what is it that I want to accomplish in my life besides just having a job.
Yeah, no, it sounds really, really great. That does. It's I suppose they're battling all the time. They're kind of fighting all the time in their 9 to 5 to kind of get ahead and everything else. And what they really need sometimes to do is strip it all away and look at themselves and say, is this what I want to do? And if it is, then how do I improve what I'm doing? And yeah, no, it sounds really, really good. One of the things that I saw that came up on the retreats, which interested me, was the kind of the location of Medellin in Colombia. How did that come about, and what's kind of the thought process behind that? How did that happen?
So my parents actually lived there.
Okay.
So they moved there about 6 years ago. They're from the U.S., but they decided they wanted to move abroad for retirement. And my brother had lived in South America for a while, learned Spanish, and Medellin was just his favorite. He loved the city. So they went down there, checked it out, fell in love. So I have spent quite a bit of time there over the last few years. Love it. And it has such a beautiful energy. It's just it's a magical type energy there. And in Colombia, but especially in Medellin, it's just like an incredible place. And so I have brought friends there before who just fell in love with it too. And so I thought this is where I want to have some retreats because it has such an amazing feminine type soft energy there in Medellin. There's really nothing like it.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked is because I lived in Colombia for many years, kind of 7 years off and on. So, but funnily enough, I never went to Medellin. I went to everywhere else, literally everywhere else except for Medellin. So, but I hear that it's beautiful and kind of, they call it the city of the eternal spring, and because the temperature's just perfect all year round, and No, I fell in love with Colombia. I'm married to a Colombian now, so.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm actually married to a Venezuelan. I just got married in March. And we actually met because I was wanting to learn Spanish so that when I go visit my parents, I'd be more fluent. And so I started this online class where you get one-to-one tutoring and fell in love with my professor.
All right.
So nice. We got married in March, right before all the shutdown happened here in the U.S. So now we're in the immigration process with him so he can stay here in the U.S.
Yeah. So he's there now?
He's here with me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank God. Yeah. He got in.
Yeah.
It's so tough, isn't it? It's kind of, because I've been through all that process, albeit in the UK, but it's so tough to go through and kind of prove everything that you've got to prove. And and
every year it gets more challenging because they add more paperwork and it's a whole process going through immigration. It really is a system that I would love to see changed. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm very optimistic, just to get us on a different topic here. I'm very optimistic about the future of blockchain. I don't know how, if you're really into that.
No, but that was on my kind of my list of things that I was going to ask you about to kind of help me out with that, because it's
that in the future, blockchain technology is going to mean that with all of our records, on the blockchain, finance, records like mortgages, things like that, everything's going to be on there. Including our passports. And so I'm hoping that as we start to move into that new world where blockchain is keeping all of our records, things will become more seamless. And hopefully immigration, travel, things like that, we won't have quite as much friction as we have right now in the system.
Do you think that it's partly created that way to kind of to just keep control of the people instead of, I spoke to somebody about this yesterday, that we want to see progress all the time, and I think that there could be a lot faster progress in all areas really, but because of the bureaucracy of government and everything else, it's almost like they can't keep up with progress, so in that case they need to hold it back a little bit, slow it down. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking about. It could be done in a much more efficient way, but isn't.
It's sad, but government actually, because I've worked in politics for over 20 years here in the U.S., government is such a laggard. The government is always way behind where the people actually are with technology. I mean, you go to some of these government websites, it looks like it was built on Netscape in the 1990s. It's just so old. So it's like the bureaucracy just takes so long to get the wheels turning and actually catch up. And what's happening in Silicon Valley and just in general, technology is moving so fast, and it's going to continue to move so fast that I almost feel like in some ways, government now, the whole thing that government tries to do with all this technology is it tries to regulate it for safety, which is understandable. If you get in an Uber, you want to know, am I getting in a car with someone who's not going to attack me? Is this going to be somewhat safe? And that's where government tries to come in and make it safe. Although the companies do have incentive too. If someone gets attacked, people are going to hear about that and not the same product or the service. But government wants to come in and try to regulate things to make it more safe. But unfortunately, it takes them a long time. They're not nimble. And I think eventually you're going to see people just adopting stuff, and it's ask forgiveness, not permission, which is kind of what Uber did. Sure. They asked for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah. And it's similar what's happening with maybe kind of at the moment, it's fashionable at the moment, the topic of censorship within social media, YouTube, Facebook. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening with that also, is that they've gone so fast that now it's kind of the governments are saying, right, you need to rein it in. We want to regulate it now. And they're just kind of playing ball now. I think the social media platforms are starting to play ball a little bit, which is then why you'll probably see new platforms come out that don't play ball. And it's kind of it's a cat and mouse game, isn't it, of trying to progress and not too much progress for the government's liking, kind of thing.
Yeah, it really is. And it just shows you how the human beings are so creative. We have such great imagination, and the technology now is enabling people to do things we've never done before. I can't even imagine what the year 2030 is going to look like. It's just going to be, I mean, you think about 2010 to 2020, how much change we've seen with technology.
Sure. Yeah.
I just can't even imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now. But government, like I said, is kind of restraining some of that because they're trying to regulate, kind of hold things back. So it's going to be interesting to see how people start leapfrogging and saying, no, like, stop holding us back. This is where we want to go. This is what we want to do. I have no idea what it's going to look like. It's me.
Do you think it's necessary to have that fear of losing control that obviously the government has, and that's the reason for regulation? Do you think that, just thinking about your example of the Uber drivers, if you're not regulating that, so somebody gets attacked and those things happen, but do you think that society will regulate itself in some ways? I'm just actually thinking of places like Venezuela, Colombia, where the regulation is a lot less, and actually the society regulates itself. So when these things happen, then it's taken care of by the local. Maybe it's not the best thing, but it's taken care of by the local people, because they know that they can't depend on local government to kind of look after it. It's quite an extreme example, but I'm just wondering whether, as a people, as a civilization, whether, as developed as we are in the Western world, could we self-regulate? Not to that degree, but do you think that we could self-regulate better than the government could in some ways? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. You know, one of the reasons I went into politics over 20 years ago, I was a young pup when I first got into it, was I was all about, like, I want to advance freedom. I want people to have freedom. And I felt like there was this threat from socialism or communism or fascism. And we've got to protect that here in the US. And it's interesting because I've kind of had this, like, spiritual awakening over the last several years, where I've realized, okay, politics is not the answer. It is a tool we can use in order to help bring about freedom. But ultimately, true freedom is about the individual. So it's about be the change you want to see in the world. I love that quote from Mahatma Gandhi. It's about you as a person, which is why I've gotten into coaching and working with people individually, because I think if we as individuals can work on ourselves, we need less regulation. We need less, like, this big brother kind of figure looking over, taking care of us, or intervening for us. Again, going back to the blockchain stuff, there's some really cool stuff that's happening with governments and how we can have more decentralized type organization. Like if you're talking about the kind of that emergent order that happens in society, without having a ruler to impose it on us. So it's like rules without rulers. I think that is where we're headed with the blockchain technology.
And how do you think that big government will respond to that? Do you think that they'll buy into it eventually, or do you think they will resist it to kind of, because if they resist it to the max that they can, it's going to be very difficult for the little man or the little person to fight against that. So do you think that eventually I don't know, we're in an arms race, aren't we? Pretty much. We're in an arms race unfortunately, between the people and the people who want to keep control. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you think that the government will allow that to come to fruition, or do you think that they will stifle it?
It's interesting. I really do think that we are heading into a new epoch, a new season for humanity, where we've had this very kind of hierarchical, top-down type governance, where there's a king or a queen or a president or some figurehead, and then there's like this level of bureaucracy that kind of pushes down on the people. My hope, and this is what I believe is going to happen, is my hope. I could be wrong. We could go in a dystopian path, or we could go in a very freedom-oriented path. The freedom-oriented path looks more like government realizes, okay, we can't keep up with this. It's like, again, it's the asking forgiveness, not permission. Eventually, we won't have to ask forgiveness because this is just how we live. We have the Ubers, we have the Bitcoin or the blockchain type decentralized voting, things like that. That the government's just going to be like, okay, we can't fight this anymore. So how do we coexist with it? And it's one of those things where, kind of like when TVs were introduced, or radio, or all these things, there's like this rapid adoption. And we're seeing the adoption rate for new technology like cell phones. People didn't have iPhones until 10, 11 years ago? Everyone has them now. They're ubiquitous. the rate of adoption is so fast now. And so it's going to be interesting to see when it comes to government systems, like maybe there will be universal basic income. I don't know. Maybe that would get rid of welfare. We don't know what that's going to look like. The system itself is going to keep grasping for life. It's going to want to hold on, right? But I think eventually we're going to get to the point where the technology is just, the demand will be so great. And people will say, this is what we want, not that. Although we could, I mean, there's China. China's gone a different path where they have leveraged this technology to have even further oppression of the people, and the people are going along with it. I don't know which path we're going to take. I hope it's the freedom-oriented one.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're not like, as a population, we're not like China at all. So I think a lot of the people in our cultures are not going to accept that level of, there's going to become a breaking point almost where that level of control is going to be too much. And is it the same in the US? Here in the UK, the public are generally just really untrusting of politicians now, completely. Whichever side it's from, kind of everybody votes for who they vote for, but generally both sides are very untrustworthy, and you never trust kind of what they've said, and they never tell you the full truth. Is it the same in the US?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Chris. There's been all these polls that have come out lately, and we've seen this trend before the pandemic, because I read all these polls. I look at them because I'm interested in what do does the public think about all this. The trust in institutions like the Center for Disease Control, which is really calling the shots right now in the U.S. when it comes to the pandemic and how to respond. The president, Congress, all of these, like even universities, we're seeing this major nosedive of trust in these institutions. And I think one of the cool things about the pandemic is, first of all, it's waking people up to, oh my God, who do we trust? Yeah. And it's a really almost kind of, it's a question that's so fundamental to what is truth. Like, you can go online and you can hear these things about, oh, Donald Trump is coming in to break up the cabal and, all of these, the dark, deep state. And then you hear the people over here, they're saying, oh no, he's part of it. And he's a fascist and he's going to be a dictator and take over. So it's like, okay, which one do I believe? And it comes down to who do you trust and what is truth? And we have to answer those questions right now to figure out where we're going to go as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's almost like I feel like it's almost like a pantomime, almost like a theatre that it's put up there to just distract more than anything. Because at the end of the day, our so-called leaders, they're actually put into power kind of to do what we ask them to do, nothing more. And that hasn't happened it probably hasn't happened in history, but that's what we're told. So maybe, like you say, maybe it's time for a change where there is a bit more direct democracy, where the people are just, the connection that we have and we can just vote. Okay, I can just go on my phone and I can vote. Maybe we need more of that, because I kind of trust my neighbour down the road more than I trust the government. So kind of... The
reason that you trust your neighbor down the road more than Boris or, someone elected a leader or Donald here in Trump in the US is because, and I've seen this happen in politics, once they get elected, there is so much pressure from the system. Like, even if you go there with the best intentions, the clearest open hearts, and I know people like that are serving in Washington, D.C. that have, they want to fight for freedom. They love the U.S. They love freedom. But they get there and the system is so against them. And I've seen it happen where over and over again, where people get elected, they get into office, and suddenly someone comes into them and says, oh, if you do that, you won't get reelected again. And all these other 5 things that you want to get accomplished, well, if you touch this one, those other 5 things won't get accomplished. So then they have to almost bow down to these systems that aren't elected. So, these staff members, the lobbyists, all these people that live there, they aren't elected, they aren't accountable to the people, but they're the ones who really call the shots.
Sure, yeah.
So that is the part of the system that we need to dismantle, because your neighbor doesn't have those influences on him necessarily.
Yeah.
Your leaders do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, which is why it would make sense in my eyes to make it more direct, the democracy, because, for example, instead of having the lobbyists have no power anymore in your local neighborhood, in your local society, your local culture. Then you have those discussions and there's no pressure from anybody else. You're actually having that discussion. You're saying, okay, I agree with you. we're going to vote in this way, and we're going to vote for this because for us in where we live, it's going to be beneficial. So I think there is a group of people who are calling shots who really don't kind of have the best interests of people at heart, and but how do you change it? That's the problem. How do you actually go about changing this system? I don't know how you do, because if you play the rules of the game, then you're going to forever keep that kind of machine turning and the same system alive, really.
Exactly. Well, there's a conference here that I go to every year in Austin called Future Frontiers. And it's all about this type of stuff we're talking about right now, about like, what is society? Where are we headed? And, these very existential type questions, but very fundamental. And it's very much based on like, an awakened consciousness of what does solid leadership look like that genuinely cares about people. And one of the phrases they use there a lot is criticize by creating. So if you don't like the way someone's doing something, if you don't like what government's doing, then you go out and create something different and better. And the only thing we need to make sure of is that governments or corporations aren't going to come in and stop those things, which we've seen throughout history, right? The first person that came up with an electric type car, powers that be that were making all this money on gasoline cars, they were like, well, we can't have that because that's competition.
Absolutely, yeah.
So as long as we can prevent those type of things happening, we're going to see people criticize by creating amazing stuff. I mean, it's kind of like what Elon Musk has been doing with a lot of his...
I actually thought that when you were saying that, I actually thought, and he's a good example of somebody who can kind of have power, but have it in the right way and use it in the right way. Because when you see in his interviews, he's a really kind of pragmatic, intelligent. He's not there to oppress anybody. He's there to kind of create, like you say, create for humanity and take us in a really good direction. So if you could have a lot of people doing that, and then as you say, if you can educate people on all levels of society to be creative and contribute, surely that's going to be a better system than currently, where you just want to hold everybody down, kind of hold them down, don't allow them to get too kind of creative and change things too much, because what will happen? It'd be
hopeful will happen with the education system, because as you know, kids are at home right now. And it's interesting, I just saw some survey results last week here in the US, and almost half of parents said I would consider homeschooling next year, which is huge. And if you think about it, these kids who maybe were in a system where it wasn't maximizing their potential, maybe not giving them individualized education opportunities, there's a huge opportunity now for these kids to get education. And when I was homeschooling, we didn't have like the internet and like all the schools, like we didn't have Khan Academy or anything like that. But now you can go online and get a world-class education from people from some of the best universities and schools in the world. And something else that we're seeing right now is all these universities are now having to shift a lot of their stuff online. And I read a really fascinating article last week from a guy who's a big Silicon Valley investor, and he said, over the next 18 months, the university system as we know it is going to completely change. Like, you're not going to see kids going to a campus. It's going to be a lot of online stuff. And it's also going to be so much more egalitarian, because you're not going to have to go through all these admissions processes to get into a good school and get a quality education. So kids aren't going to have all this debt, coming out of university. And then younger kids, if they're homeschooled, there's huge opportunity there for them to have time to be creative, imaginative, but get the basics, the essentials of what they need to be well educated. So who knows? And I say all that because in order to have people voting like in a democratic type system, they have to be educated. Otherwise, they're just going to vote themselves money from other people, right? So you've got to have a system where people are truly educated and know what good governance looks like.
That could be the catalyst. It really, like that education piece could be the catalyst that we've been waiting for, really. Because the education system that we currently have, it's not really fit for purpose. It's very antiquated. And the reason it was set up was because you would have teacher or teachers who were educated and the rest of the population wasn't educated. So they were the only people that could deliver that information. But now, as you say, we've got internet, we've got kind of, you could have the brightest minds online, kind of in real time, educating kind of a lot more people, and then obviously yourself, you've experienced that when you're homeschooled, the creativity that you can kind of bring out of the children is so much more than maybe at school, where they're under the pressure of another 20 20 students, really.
Well, a lot of parents I've been listening to who for the first time are having their kids at home and having to homeschool and work, they're like, my daughter finishes her schoolwork in like 3 hours. What is she doing the rest of the time at school? And I was like, well, the rest of the time is babysitting so that you can work.
Yeah.
That's why. They stay there till a certain time so that the parent can work and then come pick them up and take them home. And that's why we have after school programs, things like that. So when you think about it, and it's even like, I would argue the same way in the workday. This is why I'm a big advocate for remote work, because as we were talking about earlier, usually people are in an office for like 8 hours. But when you think about it, you actually only do about 4 to 5 hours of actual work where you're typing, doing a call, doing something important that's actually productive. The rest of the time, like you said, is water cooler, talking with someone, maybe in a meeting that you really didn't need to be in for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by cutting back all of that time overall that people are spending like in an office or in a school, if we cut that down, think about this extra time that we have in our days to really think about, what am I doing here? What can I give back? And we're seeing a huge outburst of creativity with people right now because they're at home, not having to commute for 2 hours. They're painting, they're singing, they're baking, like just all these incredible things that are happening right now.
Yeah, it's right, actually. Everybody does seem a lot happier being at home. But what's interesting is, I think, I don't know the US media, but the media here in the UK, a lot of people are saying it's a bad thing. A lot of things are being written saying that it's kind of breeding a group of people who are lazy. They don't want to go to work, and I'm wondering if that's got something to do with the kind of the keeping people back in, kind of keeping people in control. And okay, you've got to go back to work. You've got to go back and feed the system. And maybe it's kind of a misunderstanding of how this can benefit our culture and our society, I guess.
Yeah, I think that we will always have people in culture who are inherently lazy. But those people before all this happened were probably on welfare or, doing something just to get by. But for most normal people, they get bored. And they get tired of playing a video game or watching a movie. And they're like, okay, what can I do now? And that's where people are like, well, I did learn to play guitar. Maybe I should pick that up again. And then they produce beautiful music. So it's productivity. I think we have been so narrow in how we define productivity in our world. Does it produce money? Or does it, build this company up? Well, what about the lost art of actually like creating art and actually spending time in nature? Like that is just as productive in the sense that it feeds your soul. This last week I came across a really interesting article that I'll have to send to you, and it's called Total Work. And it's by a guy named Andrew Taggart. I'd never heard of him before, but I found this article in my research on remote work. And he's a practical philosopher who lives here in the US. And his whole thing is about, I guess there was this piece of this book or something that was written by a guy who talked about total work, which is almost like slave work, where you wake up, the first thing you think of is work. All day long, you're engaged in something related to your work. The last thing you think of before you go to bed is work. And he said it's not really dystopian and it's some future thing. It's like, this is where we're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like most people, the first thing they do when they wake up is think about work. So his argument is we need to get back to having leisure time where work is not this badge of honor. Like, oh, well, I worked, 120 hours this week or 140. It comes down to, are you being fulfilled in life outside of the job that you do? And I think we are headed in that direction, but it's going to take us a while. There's going to be some pain to get us there, but we're already seeing companies experimenting with 4-day work weeks or 4 or 5 hour work days, and they're not seeing their productivity decline at all. But they are reporting their employees are happier, and they're actually having time to engage in fun things like paddleboarding or painting or fun, giving back to their community.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a friend who works in UK sport here in the UK. And he was telling me the other day that he travels for a 4-hour round trip to and from work every day. And before he started his current job, he was going out running every day, and he was kind of entering competitions for running and all those sorts of things. So I spoke to him the other day on the phone, and he was saying exactly that. He said, I can't believe that now that I've got these 4 hours of my day back, how much I can do. I'm enjoying running again. I'm enjoying kind of, I don't know, having time with my wife again. And so it's so that, like you say, the downtime is probably more important than your work time, really. And there's a lot of people who don't have downtime. They just don't have any at all, which is incredible.
What is the purpose then? I mean, this is something that I think Andrew Taggart says well, is if that is your every waking hour, if that is the purpose of your existence, is to be a worker, I don't think that's why humans are here.
No.
That's not my. I think that we were sent here to be creative, to create beautiful things, to learn more about ourselves. Like, I'm very into spirituality. You know, I think we came here to learn more about ourselves, who we are, and have a spiritual awakening at some point in life. But when you keep people so busy at school and then a job for the rest of their life, they don't have time.
Yeah.
It's like the tyranny of the urgent. They don't have time to actually sit back and evaluate, why am I here? What is the bigger purpose in life? So it could be by design.
Yeah. Do you think that thinking in kind of a really big way, a really extreme way, do you think that we need kind of the big corporations that we have in our system? Do we need kind of the materialism that's kind of spread across our society? Do we need those things? So if you could redesign our society, which is a pretty big concept, but if you could redesign it and start again, but still keeping kind of the advancements that we've got, kind of with medicine and education and things like that, how would you do that? Do you think we need the system that we have? How would you change it if you could have a completely different society?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff as far as like our financial system. Getting rid of the Federal Reserve and having sound money is a big one. Even the way that Wall Street operates, I think, I see so many companies that start out with a really pure, awesome, mission of what they want to accomplish. And most companies are really successful because they find a need in society and they want to meet that need. And when they meet that need well, with quality and good customer service, their company grows. But then I think along the way, they start thinking, well, let's maximize profits. So we'll go to Wall Street, we'll sell shares. And then suddenly they become beholden not so much to their customers and quality and meeting a need. It becomes all about, are we maximizing profits so that we can pay back our stock investors? And so I question that very nature of that system. How can we have more localized companies that are meeting needs? Because I think something that the pandemic has shown us right now is how by globalizing everything, if something runs out, if for some reason China can't produce our medicine, suddenly here in the US we don't have medicine. So how can we make those things a little more localized so that we aren't so dependent on someone so far away that it's like a domino where everything just falls over? So I guess that's a long way of saying I would like to see that system differently of how we grow and sustain companies.
Yeah, it's a long way of saying that globalism sucks pretty much.
I will say, globalism served the purpose in, I think, bringing up a lot of third world countries. So like India, even China, a lot of these countries in Asia, by outsourcing, we gave those people a chance then to build their own companies and find jobs besides agriculture. So it has done a really cool thing, but I think now we're going to leapfrog that with technology, where if someone in Cambodia can learn how to be a software engineer, they can make just as good a living as someone living here in the US. So I think we're going to start seeing more of that, kind of bringing people more up to more equal type of a standard of living.
Sure.
Because it's not going to be based just on you have to live in Silicon Valley or San Francisco to have this job.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I imagine the society, but it is so if I imagine how I would like to see society, it's with a lot of the things most of the things we have now, but taking it back to kind of how people are in, for example, in Colombia or in Venezuela, or as in living in kind of family groups, living a bit closer to nature, living in smaller communities, relying on each other a lot more than how we do. So I think, as you say, if you can bridge that gap of education with people on the opposite side of the planet. So, for example, a family of farmers in Cambodia, you give them a really great education. You provide them with the things that they need: the internet for communication, high-speed internet, power, those sorts of things. You give it to those people, and actually those people then have a better quality of life than we do, because they're out with nature. They're kind of so, and the creativity that would come from that would be kind of a higher quality than what we're living, because we currently live, I don't know where you live actually, but we live in kind of, as a society in the West, we live in cities, more urban kind of areas. And so I don't know, do you think going back to kind of a more rural, localized community, do you think that would be better for society?
Well, I think the pandemic is causing people to examine where they want to live. And the really cool thing, and why I'm such a remote work advocate, I was advocating for this before the pandemic started, but the cool thing that I'm seeing now, because everyone's had to experiment with this, and they've been forced to because of the pandemic, is so many of them now are realizing, we can let our employees work from home, and our productivity and our quality is not going to suffer. So that's why you're seeing companies like Facebook and Twitter and Amazon, they're all letting their employees, like some of them are making this a permanent thing where they will just let them work from home forever. And they're all announcing that now because they've realized after 8 weeks, okay, we can do this. The really cool thing about that is that means that you could go live on a mountain in Colorado, and as long as you have quality internet and a good technology, you can keep doing your job. So if it's a knowledge-based job.
Sure, yeah.
So I think we're going to start seeing that, where people are going to say, okay, I don't have to live in an apartment in New York City and do my job. I can go live on the land in Montana and still do my job well. So I think it's gonna bring more quality of life, where you won't be so location dependent for your income.
Sure, that'd be great. I think it'd be brilliant to live in a kind of somewhere that's going to feed your kind of animal instinct inside, I guess. Just touching on, it was something I was going to talk about a bit later, but touching on what you've just mentioned leads into it quite well. Is that I read a story today about Las Vegas, that they've kind of they've received a huge donation from the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. I don't know if you saw that story.
I didn't see that.
Of coronavirus test kits. And it was worth about $20 million. So they were struggling to get test kits for everybody. And then suddenly he kind of comes up with the goods. So it made me think, actually, similar to what you were saying, is why, of all the places on the planet, for example, Las Vegas, why is Las Vegas needing to be bailed out almost? It should never, in my opinion, should never get to that level where such an incredible place that has so much wealth there has to rely on somebody else to. So why do you think that's happened? Because I know that's happened also in the UK, in other parts of the world as well. Why is this happening, that kind of they're having to rely on external benefactors almost to bail them out?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's where my husband and I got married in March.
Right.
Was Las Vegas, and we were there the day they started shutting down all the casinos and all the hotels. So we were actually like some of the last people to check out of our hotel, and then they closed it all. So it was really interesting, because I've been to Vegas before. I got married there in March, and usually I don't know if you've been there, but it's just packed, tons of people, lots of money, just, it's cram-packed with people. When we were there, I actually took a lot of video, because it was like a ghost town. There was literally no one there.
I've seen images now, yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah. So it was like our flight back to Austin, Texas, where I live, there was maybe 30 people on a plane that can sit 160. So they're hurting right now because they don't have the financing. But the question you're asking, why do they need to be bailed out? Here in the U.S., a lot of our states are overextended financially. So they have spent money that they don't have. And a lot of that has to do with promising pensions to government workers, and they don't have the money to pay them. So a lot of these states are on the verge of going bankrupt. And so as you're seeing all this money from Washington, D.C. flow out into the states right now, a lot of them are using some of this money that's supposed to go towards helping with the pandemic. They're trying to figure out how to pay off their bills.
Right.
So a lot of them are overextended. And so I don't know about this particular situation with the tests for COVID, but it could be that perhaps the city just did not have $20 million to provide that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe he has an investment in the city, so he wants it to be tested so the hotels will open up again. I don't know.
Well, there is an ulterior motive, surely. He can't just be doing it out of the goodness of his own heart, I wouldn't imagine.
Financial interest there of him wanting to open up a hotel or something, and they need tests, they don't have them. So he's like, well, $20 million is a good investment in tests if it will bring people back to spend money in the city.
Yeah.
Because that city is entirely focused on tourism.
Yeah,
which
sure.
there's none of it right now.
Yeah. But I think so. It leads me to think, because there's a lot of this going on, this investment going on from people from the Middle East, kind of sheikhs, and this guy from Abu Dhabi. China's doing a lot of this investing in South America, in Africa, and they do it a lot with other interests at heart. So they kind of put the infrastructure in. I know the Chinese in Africa putting infrastructure in, roads and railways and electricity infrastructure. And then they do it kind of on a loan basis. So now you owe us money with interest and everything else. So it doesn't sit well with me that's kind of allowed. Okay, Africa's different, but in our society, how that's allowed to kind of happen. How have we got to this in our society where we don't have money to pay kind of the local council bills? How have we got to this level? It's crazy. Do you not find it crazy?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that has to do, first of all, like I said, with the Federal Reserve, us not having a true money system, which is why we see inflation increasing exponentially, especially with them pumping all this money out there. It's going to cause more inflation. So I think part of that, yes, is the inflation, not having a sound money system, but also when the money is taxed, where does it go? Like, we pay a ton of taxes every year. Where does that money actually go? Because I'm not really seeing it being put back into fixing the roads or some of the infrastructure that we have here in the U.S. So it's going somewhere else. And that's what people want to know, is where is all of my money going? Because I'm paying taxes, but I'm not seeing it reinvested in my community.
Yeah.
Which is, again, then kind of takes us back to kind of if we had direct democracy, your local area, your local community deciding on how things work and that sort of thing, that would be a lot more transparent, because you would discuss together, okay, we need to know where this money's going. Okay, I'd like to see the accounts, please. Oh, okay, so now we need to vote on, because this isn't great, so we need to vote on it. How are we going to fix this? And rather than relying on a cabal or a kind of a group of people at the top who like you say, where is this money going? In the UK, for example, there's quite a lot of controversy over that the UK sends a lot of foreign aid to other countries. So, for example, to India, one of the largest economies on the planet, sends aid to India, and then India has a multi-billion-dollar space program. So it doesn't add up. And like you say, people are starting to ask questions now. So this might lead us to the end. Yeah.
I would love to see that change, and I think that with technology and the way things are moving, we are going to see some changes in accountability, transparency, ease of access to information. We've actually been fighting that here in the U.S. right now, because a lot of governments, as a result of the pandemic, have been closing their meetings to the public, where they've been saying, oh, well, for the safety of the public, we're not going to let you know what we're talking about. And we're like, no, wait. Transparency first. Let's find out. We are paying you to make decisions for us, so we need to know how you're making those decisions, what information you're relying on. So they're trying to roll back some of those transparency laws that we've worked really hard to get passed here in the U.S. So that is concerning. But my hope is that moving forward with technology, things like blockchain technology, we'll be able to see where does the money go, where is it being spent, and have some accountability outside of the accountants that work for the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me if this is something that you don't want to talk about, but Trump, so just thinking about transparency, do you think he's doing a good job for transparent? Like, I think a lot of he's stirred up the hornet's nest in Congress. I think he's ruffled a lot of feathers, and I think from my perspective, it seems like he's done that on purpose. But I don't know what the end kind of motive is for that. If it's for transparency and to shake things up a little bit, then I don't think it's that bad. From your perspective, being inside the US, what do you think?
I'm really not sure what to make of it all yet. Because he's actually done some really positive things for the U.S. Some very positive policies that have been passed, things that will give people some more freedom. But then there's some other things where I kind of go, I'm not quite sure what the long-term implications of this will be for the public. You know, one is like the immigration thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm very closely tied to that because of my husband, you know, in the immigration process. So I'm not quite sure what to think about it. But I think he is opening the eyes of many people to a lot of the hypocrisy, a lot of stuff going on in DC, because he is essentially one of the first outsiders that the system has had in a long time, in the sense that he's never run for office before. This was his first time. So he is doing things a little bit differently than I think others have in the past.
Yeah. I think as an outsider, it looks like he's taking the pressure a lot better than the previous candidates as well. As you say, the pressure that forces them down a certain path. I think he relishes that challenge coming from the business world. He kind of relishes people confronting him, and he likes that challenge. So I don't know. As you say, we need to wait and see what happens. But I think it can only be good just to ruffle a few feathers so that you then see the true nature of people. A good example is, for example, for me, is Joe Biden at the moment. So kind of if Trump hadn't been kind of challenging and being so kind of peacockish and really kind of showing off, I don't think we would have seen Biden going as hard campaigning and then slipping up as much as he has. I mean, what do you think about his recent faux pas? Was it yesterday? Where
2 days ago.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, for people that have followed politics for a while, this is kind of par for the course with him. This is how Joe Biden is. I mean, when Obama ran for office, and they had been in the Senate together, like colleagues, he said something about, people would vote for Obama because he's a clean-looking black man. Or, you know, it was just like, what? And I was shocked he ended up actually being his running mate after he made such a racist comment like that. So, you know, I wasn't shocked when he said that. Some of us jokingly refer to him as like crazy Uncle Joe. He's like that kind of uncle you have at the parties that says stuff and you're just like, okay, he's drunk or something.
Yeah.
That's literally how he is. What I don't understand is how he gets away with it. He gets like the biggest pass just because he's the candidate, and it really shouldn't be that way.
I was actually thinking, how did he get elected to be a candidate? I don't understand how that happened, to be perfectly honest.
Well, yeah, if you've ever seen House of Cards, which, you know, was a British version, which was excellent, and they took it to the US and did a really good version on Netflix. There's so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Like, these guys, they know how to pay off people so they don't run against them. Yeah. Once you are an incumbent in a seat like Joe Biden is in a state like Delaware, you're pretty much guaranteed to stay there forever, because someone would have to have a lot of money and be able to, like, it's really, once someone's entrenched in a position, it's really hard to like pull them out of that. Say there's a huge mistake or a big title shift in the voters in their district.
Yeah. It's just hard for me to rationalize knowing that you're not going to win the next general election if you vote for him, but people still do, which just seems, I don't know, it seems insane.
I don't know. The only thing I can say is, again, it goes back to that that deep state, dark state, whatever you want to call it, that really does run things behind the scenes. When they've got someone in position, they will make sure that there are no opponents, that their candidate stays there, and unless something like major happens, they're pretty much guaranteed to stay in that seat.
Which kind of that backs up what you said, that some people think that Trump's the savior for kind of getting rid of all the deep state players and that sort of thing. But you're right that maybe he's the kind of their new pawn. And that's why they're putting Biden against him, because that's it. Keeps him there, and you really don't know. You don't know.
And it's interesting because the candidates who are usually the most popular outsiders, if you could even consider like a Bernie Sanders, he's kind of like an outsider because he's very socialist. Those guys and girls usually don't make it to being the ultimate candidate. So you're basically, the joke is kind of like flip side of the same coin. Either way, you're going to get someone who's part of this whole system and is going to protect it, even though they talk a good game. They don't actually get anything done. So it is disappointing, and honestly, that's why I don't think it's necessarily about a candidate. I think it's about, we've got to look at the system itself and figure out, how do we change the system, or do we build a parallel system that outcompetes this old dying one, which we are seeing it is dying. Like there is no way this can sustain itself. There's no way. No. Economically, politically, there's just no way. So I think that we are in this transition into a new era where these old systems that served a purpose, they just aren't working now. And with technology and where we're headed, we're going to have almost like a blank slate where we can create really cool new stuff if we're ready and willing to do it.
Sure. I'm wondering now, I wonder if in the past civilizations like the Maya and the Egyptians also had this conversation that we're having. Do you know what I mean? So what if we don't move into another era? That's such a negative way to look at this. But what if kind of that control level never goes away? And what if we just kind of eat ourselves as a society? Do you know what I mean? That is I don't think it's as possible as you say, as hopefully something new coming, but it is certainly a possibility that we've had civilizations before that have faced these same kind of challenges and not made it through, environmentally and economically and societally and things like that. So yeah, it's just we do well to kind of learn those lessons, I think, of those civilizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to it's easy to get really super stressed. Like I was on Reddit last night and some girl or I don't assume it was a girl, was talking about how they were just having a panic attack about all the power that Donald Trump has. Oh my God. And I thought, if you focus on what is going on right now and you start looking outside of yourself, you start looking at systems and at rulers and leaders, it's easy to get very panicked about what's going on. But if you look at a bigger picture of we are such a short little time frame in history, the context of history and how civilizations rise and fall, yeah, it kind of sucks if you're in one of those civilizations that's falling at that time. It's going to be rough. You might even die a horrible death. Who knows? But if you're able to look at the bigger picture of world history, where we're headed, and what your part in it is, especially if you have a spiritual belief that this is not all that is, it's just this one lifetime here, it does bring more peace and comfort knowing I can survive this. Like, this is just an experience that I'm having right now. Or even if you get into like, are we a hologram type, conversations, if that's true, then you are just a spirit having a physical experience right now. And don't get so worked up about some of the stuff that's happening, because first of all, you can't control it. And second, maybe you're just here to learn a lesson during this particular time in history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm kind of a big advocate of that we're just a consciousness. We're not actually kind of physical. Everybody focuses on the physical world and what's happening around you and your physical self. And actually we're not. We're here to just experience things, just touch on things and just learn and kind of see what we're capable of. And I think that's that leads me on to the next kind of subject I wanted to talk about. Was I think in life you have to learn what you're capable of in all kind of areas. And if you don't know that, then you'll always kind of shy away from challenges and things like that. But so, for example, it might be something physical. It might be that you want to see how fit you can get, or how far you can run, how far you can swim. Kind of in conflict, having arguments with people and having that adrenaline rush of being in an argument. What is your capability of being able to debate with somebody or get physical with somebody or whatever it is? It's I think that's part of life as well, is to push your limits and see how capable you are. I don't know what your feelings are for self kind of personal development, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the path that I've been on the last few years is, really having my eyes awakened or open to what's really going on, like, these things that we're talking about, these systems, and beyond that, what are the programmings that have been placed on me? I was raised a conservative, fundamentalist Christian here in the United States, and all of the programming and systems that went into that and how it shaped my worldview and what I believe. And when I was finally able to step back and realize I am not those labels with which I am identifying. Yes, I do live in the US. Yes, I am a woman. And I was born during this time. But I do not have to identify with those labels. I can be much more about what is my spirit here to experience. And once I started stepping back and looking at things from that perspective, suddenly the world opened up to me and I was able to see new possibilities and realize, okay, my life does not have to be, I went to law school, I'm going to be a lawyer, or, I was born in the US, I'm always going to live in the US because this is my identity. And if you look around, you see how people are so bought into this program.
Absolutely, yeah.
So bought into it. But then once you start becoming conscious of it and you start putting aside those labels, suddenly it's like, oh, I don't need to get pissed off when my football team loses. It's a game and I love it, but I do not have to identify hardcore like this is my identity of being a fan of this particular team.
Sure.
Which I know is particularly relevant in the UK. So once you start peeling off those labels and all of these roles and programming, suddenly it's like, okay, well now I want to start questioning everything.
Yeah.
And seeing what are the programmings that have been put into me over the years.
Yeah, it's like every when you take off, as you say, when you take off the labels and you see how you react now to things that are outside of your comfort zone, and you take it to the nth degree. So then when similar experiences happen again in the future, you say, okay, I can deal with this. This isn't a big deal. One of those for me was going to Colombia and living in Colombia. I kind of lived out in the countryside. It was up in Cartagena, but out in the countryside. So we lived there, and it was a completely different way of life. Even to the cities in Colombia, it was completely different. A really, really different way of life. And for me, that was just again testing that my experience level. What was I comfortable with? Kind of how did I feel in different situations? And it was really, really interesting. And I think everybody should do that. And as you say, traveling is such a massive way of taking you outside of your comfort zone, where you don't speak the language, you don't conform, or you don't fit into the culture and the society that lives there, and you have to find ways to adapt and kind of fit in. And I think that's one of the best things in life, is to go and have all of those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was so all about being raised in the US and working in politics here, and that was my program. And then when my parents decided to leave the country and I started traveling outside and falling in love with different cultures, I was like, I really don't want to identify as like, I am US. Like, this is my identification. Yes, it's my passport. And yes, I live here. And there's some really awesome things about this country. But there's really awesome things about Colombia. There's really awesome things about the UK. Yeah, it's like you start really looking at things from more of a global, we are one, we are all human beings, and we don't need to be so tribal. Now, like, honestly, if you're going to a football game, like, yes, you want to cheer for your team. Like, you want them to win. It's fun. It's exciting. But it doesn't have to be your identity. Yeah. And like you said, getting out into the world really helps you realize that stuff.
Yeah, and there's something connecting with other people. I think, even if they're not from your tribe or whatever, there's something primal about that of kind of just connecting. It's almost like an animal. It's something animal inside us. It's like when dogs meet for the first time. They don't talk. They just meet, and they just kind of they know if they like each other. They know if they don't, and kind of there's something that happens, isn't there? That I don't know whether it's kind of pheromones. I don't know if it's something.
It's energy.
Kind of a different sense maybe. I don't know, but I love it, and it's something that they have in Colombia that I think we've lost here a little bit, is having moments where you don't necessarily have to talk a lot. So you don't have to, there are moments where you can just be together and have a gentle conversation, but without getting too deep. And do you know what I mean? I think we've lost that a little bit here. Everything has to be kind of blown out of proportion, exaggerated, and you have to fight your corner. And we've kind of lost that a little bit here in our societies, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful charm about South America and Colombia, where, like, when I was just there at Christmas time and we went to a festival for Noche de las Velas, Night of the Candles, which is what they celebrate right around Christmas time there. and it's a huge festival. Like all the families come out into the street, they barbecue, they make natilla, like they just like, it's just this big, block party basically.
Yeah.
And there was just something about it where I thought, I haven't experienced anything like this in the U.S. in a long time. They're almost like where the U.S. was about 40 years ago. As far as just like connection, community, just so giving and loving. And I feel like for some reason in the U.S., we have lost a lot of that cultural connection with community where you don't really know your neighbors anymore.
No. I don't see. I wonder if that's where we could go back to a little bit. It's something that we really need to go back to, is that community of okay, you have your neighbors around, but also you share moments of exchanging, buying and selling, services, education. Can you paint? Come and paint my house. Can I teach you something? I'll teach you something. That you do feel in Colombia, where people will really welcome you in and help you and give you a coffee and all of those things. It's something we need to go back to, really. Instead of us saying it's missing from our culture or our society, we need, as you said, we need to take an individual responsibility to go back to that. I think
it's part of that too is why are people so divided? Like, why aren't they? And I think a lot of it has to do with the media. I haven't had cable TV for years now, and so I get my news like from Reddit, or I go on a website once a day just to kind of read the headlines.
Sure.
But I think people are just so divided. Where they're like, oh, you're a Trump person, you're a Bernie Sanders person, or you're into football, I'm into tennis. Like everything's just so black and white. Like we don't have anything in common, so we're just not going to be human beings to each other. And I feel like this pandemic, it's kind of been a double-edged sword. Some people have stepped up and really shown more community spirit and how loving they are. Other people, it's really brought out, it's exacerbated the problem of like not connecting, or stay away from me, 6 feet, and it's made them suspicious of other people. So we're seeing like, who are the people that are very community-oriented, and those who are very like, stay away from me. We've got to overcome that though, for sure.
Yeah. And it's a strange experience that we're having at the moment with everybody being kind of separate, and I think when everything's done, like you say, I think through the media it's exacerbated a lot more. But people tend these days to want to live in their echo chambers. I think people want to hear the same opinions, and if anybody doesn't have their opinion, it's promoted to block that person or not speak to that person or kind of unfollow them on social media. And I just think it's really divisive, because you may have people in your family or your friends who have a different opinion to you, and people end up falling out. But in the old days, especially in England, it used to be you'd go to the pub, two of you would have a different opinion, you'd have a big argument, kind of whatever, and then eventually you kind of, okay, let's have a drink together, and then it's kind of sorted. Then we've missed that opportunity, or we're missing that as well from our society now, to be able to debate things that we don't agree with, and then to come back together and go, actually, do you know what, we still love each other, we're still kind of part of the same group. Really, it's a shame.
And I do think, honestly, a lot of that has come from politics and media, because instead of having to go out and talk to all voters, I want to talk to a certain group to get elected. And so screw the rest of them. I'm just going to talk to this group to get elected, and maybe a few that are in the middle I need to kind of pull over to my side. So it's become very divisive. And actually, there have been polls that have been done in the U.S. and back in the in studies. Like back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, politicians in Washington, D.C. were much more likely to like co-sponsors each other's legislation. They were much more likely to reach across the aisle and partner with their colleagues. It wasn't so left-right. It was really in the 1990s that all of a sudden things just split and they became very divisive, and it's almost like very tribal. And ever since then, we've seen the American people's anxiety and their anger and their lack of trust in these institutions just plummet in the last 30 years because of all of this that's been going on. So I think a lot of it does come from, first of all, fighting sales. Like if you go on any of the UK, publications, Daily Mail, whatever, it's all about dividing, like controversy.
Yeah.
Who's fighting right now? And same way in the U.S. Like it's all about scandal, fighting, divide. We have to get over that, or else we're just not gonna have any constructive conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a bit of hope from that, is that there are a lot more people than we realise who kind of have these sorts of conversations and actually aren't as divided as we see what happens on the media, and we think that you've got to be part of this team or this team. But actually, there's a lot of people who are intelligent enough to say, actually, we don't need to be this team or this team. We just need to look at the policies and agree with just the policies. But actually, I don't belong to Trump because at times he's a complete idiot. And I don't need to belong to Hillary because equally she's not the best. It's kind of, okay, so I like the policies, but I'm not going to jump on that team. It's good. I think there are some people out there. There's some normal people left.
Well, and that is something I don't know. It's like I can see a vision of the future where we go back to this, what you and I are talking about, kind of like that beautiful energy they have in Colombia, of being a community, not so divisive. And I can see us going back to that. I don't know what that bridge is, though. Like, I don't know I don't know if it's going to be the technology question of getting rid of some of these institutions and letting things be more decentralized. I don't know if there's going to be like a spiritual awakening where people suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm being manipulated by the media and all these systems. And I'm going to, like, this is the whole thing I coach about, is getting rid of this programming and stepping back from the systems and helping you see what you really want in life. So I feel like that is my calling, is to help people realize that, because as we wake up people individually, they're going to step back from all this and be like, you know what? I don't need to identify as a Republican, Trump supporter. I just want to, like, how can I help people? Like, fundamentally, how can I be a good human being and support my community? That's what we need to get to. So I'm doing it through the coaching avenue, but somehow we need to do it, like, we need to multiply that and get a lot of people awake and engaging.
Yeah, tech would obviously be the thing that we could use on a mass scale. But my concern about technology is that it seems like it's becoming more and more regulated, as we've already explained. So that's then where, again, information can be put out in a certain way that is going to give a certain narrative, and people then kind of just believe it because that's all they're seeing. So I don't know how you do that. I've thought sometimes about the idea of creating a kind of a new online system or something that's untouchable. I know you have
the works.
Sorry?
In the works.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are working on that. That is the new. So, like, the internet that we have right now is like Internet 1.0. And with the blockchain technology and what they're creating, they're basically going to create a brand new internet where we're not going to have all these stupid passwords. It's like annoying. It's going to be much like identities will be able to be verified. It's not going to have all the dirt and muck, and it's going to be much better moderated. We're already seeing some platforms like Steam. It's kind of like the Reddit, but it's on the blockchain platform. So the Internet 2.0 is coming, and it is going to be built on a decentralized system, which I think is going to make it easier for people to have their own YouTube, to have their own banking, their own bank without having to go to a bank system. There's going to be all these things that will be decentralized that we'll be able to go to. They're going to help foster and expedite some of these things that we're talking about. Sure. That's my hope. Yeah, no,
it sounds perfect. It sounds like a utopia compared to what we're living at the moment, I think. How much do you think the media? How much do you think journalists themselves? So we talk about the media as if it's kind of a big monster that's kind of a mythical being that's out there and it's putting out misinformation. But how much responsibility do you think the actual journalists themselves have for what's happening here in the UK? There's kind of a group of journalists across all the different channels who kind of they have their fingers in all of the pies, kind of with all the information. I imagine it's the same in the US. And do you think they've got a real responsibility for what's going on?
So journalism is critically important. I actually, when I started my career, my whole goal was to do media relations and politics, because I love reporting and journalism and all that. But what I've learned over the years, having worked now in political communications for so long, is Journalists serve a very important role. We need them to expose things. We need them to show us the truth and tell us what's going on. But unfortunately, what I have seen happen is instead of being objective and actually offering, like doing their homework and actually doing tough work, which means doing a lot of investigative stuff, they go for the easy story of more division, and they themselves are usually taking a side. And so a lot of them, even if they say, oh, well, I don't affiliate with a certain party. Well, you do affiliate with a certain ideology, and usually that fits into one of the parties. And so, unfortunately, a lot of reporters that I've interacted with over the years, they have an agenda. They're not really trying to seek out the truth. They're coming to you to get a quote to say they did the ethical thing and got a quote from you for their story, which is really sad. It shouldn't be that way. It should be get to the truth, present the facts, and we don't really need commentary. Just tell us what happened and what's really going on here. And again, that comes back to the question we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, what is truth? Because some person might say, well, the truth is I didn't take that $10,000. Someone else may say, well, the truth is you did take it, and here's the facts. So it's kind of a very murky situation right now with journalism.
It sounds exactly the same as what's happening in the UK, and even online, the journalists, they're being called out on Twitter, and they really don't like it. And I think the fact that they're reacting how they're reacting, and they're kind of fighting back, rather than taking it on the chin and saying, okay, let me try and be a better journalist, they're kind of fighting their corner of defending one political side. It's really telling that actually that's what they're there for. They're there to defend that side, really, and it's a shame. It's such a shame.
I think we're going to have to move to I am seeing a trend with this right now, with journalism that's like more of a nonprofit, where there's not money involved in it, because a lot of those reporters feel like they have to hold their corner because they lose their job. Like we here in the U.S., at least during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of reporters lose their positions because their outlet is not making the money it used to from advertising. So they're getting a lot of readership, but their ads are dropping. And so we're going to have to move to some type of a system where these reporters are not dependent on any particular outlets, like a newspaper or a TV station. I think we're going to see more individual reporters who maybe go on, one of these platforms where you support them directly or you pay for their journalism. We're going to do something, because right now I feel like they're worried about losing their jobs, so they're trying to do what their editor wants, or they are very ideologically tied to whatever their newspaper wants them to do.
Yeah, that would be great. That would, if we could create some sort of system where you can support actual, so the top journalists who have the most support from people actually get the kind of the most clicks and views, because people understand that they're doing their job well, they're reporting the truth, and that'd be a really great system. You'd end up with the best people at the top then.
Yeah, and I think that is where we're headed to, like when we were talking about like what is truth. People are losing trust in like the Washington Post or the Guardian, or they're losing trust in some of these institutions. But if they trust a reporter, like if they trust a specific reporter they really like, they will trust the information they get from that person. And so I think we're going to start seeing a move from institutions to more like, I read this reporter on this particular topic because I trust her. I know she's doing good work.
Yeah, and I think that'll work really well. I don't know how the censorship will then work across things like YouTube, because I mean, it was incredible. There was a story the other day from a really good doctor here in the UK, and he always tweets about kind of the status of COVID. Every day he'll tweet explaining about the deaths and people that have contracted it and things like that. But his tweets are actually always really, really, really fact-based and but really positive. So it's a nice read. It's a good feeling to see. He says, okay, I think we're going to turn the corner soon. And I think, so he was giving a really positive message, but he didn't have any political affiliations. He just became popular for commentating on this. And YouTube, over the last couple of days, took down a video where a podcaster had invited him on and done an interview with him, and took down the video with him on there because they said it was contrary to what the World Health Organization was saying. And So it's hard at the moment, I think, for people to get to the truth because everything's been so kind of censored, I guess.
It's true. And I think we are going to start seeing people moving away from platforms like YouTube. I mean, even like Joe Rogan this week announced that he's moving from YouTube over to Spotify. I don't know if this is true, but I heard that it was because YouTube wasn't going to let him have, like, they wouldn't post his podcast video if he interviewed certain people like Alex Jones, who's one of his more controversial guests that he was on the program. So I heard, don't know if this is true, that he said, okay, well, I'm going to move somewhere where I will make the money I could be making here, but I will be able to have the freedom without censorship. So, you know, we are seeing people move to different platforms. They're going to give them more of that freedom. Like, kind of like we've seen people moving away from like cable TV. Now they're going to places like Netflix or Hulu, different platforms, because they can write about what they want to write about and not have censorship. So, you know, a lot of people now are moving to like BitChute to post their videos because they're not seeing the censorship like they are on YouTube. So, you know, again, I think the age of the Google, YouTube, Facebook conglomerates, we're still in it, but I think we are going to move through it, and we're going to see more people decentralizing and finding platforms where they can share information.
Yeah. Maybe that's coming to this. Maybe this is the next evolution now. Hopefully that's what's happening. Fingers crossed. Right. So, kind of another question that I have, slightly segueing away from what we were talking about, but is how much do you think that we are kind of animals still? We've transcended that. We're obviously very, very spiritual and more than just a physical being now as humans. But how connected do you think we are still to our animal instinct, our animal inside?
Well, you know, a lot of the spiritual teachers that I listen to right now have been talking about how we are going through a big consciousness raising time right now on the planet. And we were going to be going through this anyway in 2020. I think the pandemic has kind of expedited some things. But I think people are starting to realize that we are more than just, you know, the fundamental, the basic elemental type animal instincts to which you're referring. So I think we are waking up to more of the spiritual side of things. And there's always going to be a segment of society that is a little bit more evolved, I guess you could say, when it comes to spirituality, where we're headed, kind of heading more into like the fifth dimension type reality. But there's always going to be human beings that are themselves evolving and growing spiritually and evolving their consciousness. And they are the ones that identify more closely with some of those basic animal type instincts. And like my husband and I right now are watching a program about Pablo Escobar. It was actually a program that was it's on Netflix right now, but it was first produced on Caracol. So it's a Colombian telenovela. Yeah. And you were watching just the violence that the Medellin cartel had, they were engaged in, and I was like, man, these people, did they even have spirits? Like the level of what they were, the brutality of what they did to other human beings. Yeah. And it's really made me think, okay, those people, for whatever reason, just weren't quite as evolved in their spiritual consciousness. They came to serve a purpose, and they hurt a lot of people. And if you believe in karma, which I do, they're gonna have to come back around and deal with that. So I guess it's a long answer to say we're kind of on a scale, and I think that we are growing right now.
Do you think that we still need our primitive side, or do you think that it's kind of eventually will completely move away and kind of I'm just thinking about kind of that primitive side in us of fight or flight, and kind of I think there's a place inside the human for that. That's really powerful to be able to call on it when needed, rather than being kind of. And I do believe that's maybe why there's kind of a lot of depression and things like that with people who aren't connected to that kind of primal side, because they don't go and enjoy nature. They don't kind of have a bit of conflict now and then to bring out that kind of release of adrenaline and that sort of thing. It's all very kind of vanilla, the feeling that they get. So Do you think that there's space for that animal inside us as we evolve, or?
I guess it's kind of the way you're describing it now, like the animal side. I think, are you talking more about like how we connect to the earth? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, how we connect to our genetic side of actually being an animal. So I guess we have our conscious human evolved side, the way that we see each other and how advanced we are, but then kind of how we connect to being, for example, a primitive, a Neanderthal, or somebody who's less human, but kind of enjoys connecting, as you say, connecting more to nature, connecting more to those primal feelings, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we'll ever lose that desire to be part of the earth, part of Gaia, because we are so energetically connected to her and to the earth. And so I think you're right that actually when people get separated from that, when they're living in high rises, apartments, and they're not actually getting out into nature, like you said, they can get very anxious, depressed. They're not actually getting back to the core of that energy that we share with the world. And so I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think, in fact, like you said, we need to have more of that actually, because it really does help us connect to our purpose. And like we were talking about earlier, we can get so caught up in our work at our computers all day and we lose that connection to slowing down, going out and enjoying the sunshine and the air and all of that. We have to have that. And it is something we've lost, which I hope that as a result of this pandemic, people are slowing down to quote unquote smell the roses. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's so important.
Yeah. Do you like to go outdoors? Are you in Austin? Are there a lot of places for you to go?
Yeah, actually, in fact, my husband and I just bought a kayak, so we're gonna go out and do some kayaking, get out on the water. So we're excited about that. But yeah, Austin's actually a really cool city. We don't get the winters like the rest of the country, so we can actually go out and do stuff pretty much year round. It gets super hot here during the summer. But yeah, there's lots of beautiful rivers and parks, and it's a very active community here in Austin too.
Okay, I'll put it on my bucket list. I'll have to head over there at some point and check it out.
You have to. Yeah, Austin is a really cool city.
Awesome.
Well, I'm just going to go on to just a different topic just quickly now, because we've been going an hour and 40 now, so you might be getting tired. So this is on Ask Reddit. So each podcast I'll do a session on where I'll head over to Reddit and I'll touch on something that somebody's asked or a topic that they're talking about, and then we discuss. So this was just on Ask Reddit, and it's from the user Purple Disco Tool, and he or she says, "What aspects of your childhood do you wish people growing up today could experience?"
That's a really interesting question. The first thing that came to my mind was the freedom. When I was growing up, I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is about 2 hours south of Austin on the Gulf, or closer to the Gulf. And I had friends on my street, and we would stay outside and play, like in the dirt, like with animals, like just, it was so fun just to go out and play all day and get dirty and just, be outside all the time. And I do see some kids doing that, like on their bikes or, but I just don't see as many kids in the street playing and doing stuff as I used to when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. So that is one thing that I wish we could bring back and have kids, like, I don't know if it's because they're playing video games or Fortnite or whatever, but it'd be great if they could have that balance of, like we were just talking about, getting out into nature again.
Yeah. I think our parents used to just kick us out of the house at some point and just say, just go and play. I remember in the summer, my mum would just kick me out of the house and say, come back for your dinner tonight, kind of thing. Yeah, and it was great, and it was such a good time. And it's, I don't know, maybe it's really damaging that for children of today, that where they're in the house all day, on the computer all day. I mean, for me, kind of social media, growing up with no social media, no internet even, was kind of something that I'd like children to experience now.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Is the social media stuff is. I keep reading all these articles about. In fact, I think Joe Rogan had a guy on a psychologist or a doctor on his show one day, talking about the impact on young girls of social media and how there's all this anxiety, bulimia, depression, suicide, and it really coincided with the time that social media and personal cell phones took off.
Right.
So that is one thing that I have no idea what it would be like to navigate adolescence or even prepubescence with all of that stuff going on. Like I can't even imagine what that was like, what it is like.
No, and I think kind of teenagers now they could do with some sort of retreat from everything that goes on in their mind. They just need to give their brains a rest and kind of it's pretty mad what they have to go through these days.
So the subreddit about psychonauts, about people that are doing psychedelics.
Yeah.
Do some mushrooms or something.
they need to open up their mind a little bit. But yeah, there was loads of things from my childhood. There was only 4 channels on the TV. Did you used to have something similar? Only a few channels?
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know if we had cable, but I knew people that did have cable. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was I've just written down a few things. There was milkman in the UK. Everybody used to have milkman deliveries. So a man would drive around in it weirdly in an electric, like a little electric cart. So you'd hear this electric noise in the morning, and they'd put bottles outside your front door. So that's a strange one. And then the other one was smoking in pubs and bars. Are you old enough to remember?
Yes, and I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, so I'm actually glad that kids don't experience that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want it to. I don't smoke, but and I wouldn't want. I don't think I'd want it to come back permanently. But it was just a different experience. Like people now have to go outside to smoke. So if you're in a conversation and in a group, then 2 or 3 may go outside to smoke, and if you don't smoke, you're just stuck there, kind of talking to yourself, really. But yeah. I don't know.
The other thing that came to my mind when you were talking was also air travel. Like I remember when I was younger, you dressed up to go on an airplane, like not formal, but you would wear like business, like almost like business casual type clothing.
Yeah.
And I remember they would like serve you food and drinks, like on domestic flights.
Yeah.
And now, it's like they cram you in. It's so uncomfortable. I would love to see some innovations in air travel, because that to me is just, it's almost like being on a bus now. It's not a very comfortable experience.
Yeah. Are there airlines in the US who you have to pay for food and things as well? In the UK, we've got a few budget airlines that do that.
Yeah, most of the domestic airlines here don't serve meals anymore. You have to purchase them unless you're in first class. Whereas in the past, you were on the domestic, if you were in coach class, you still got like a meal. Maybe it wasn't the elevated meal like served on china in first class, but you still got something. And I noticed that in Colombia they still do that.
Right.
In Colombia, if you fly a domestic airline, they still treat you like they're like 30 years behind the US. They still will give you like a nice meal on a domestic flight. So yeah, they just don't do that now on airplanes.
It's an experience then, isn't it? It's not just a quick journey. You're having a little experience then. That's a lot of those experiential things have been taken away from us, I think. I don't know why.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just in favor of just cutting costs, isn't it? That's what it's all about these days, I think.
Yeah, like it goes back to the whole conversation we were having about Wall Street and maximizing profit, and what are we going to get back to our stockholders, not necessarily how can we make this the best experience. I think Virgin Airlines did that for a while. They actually did a really good job of like making it a fun experience for you. And I haven't flown with Virgin in a while, but at least here in the US, they did a really good job for a while. And then things kind of just started. I think they were bought out by Alaska Airlines.
Right. Well, Virgin, it's interesting, Virgin here in the UK as well. I would have kind of said the same thing about Virgin products here in the UK. They used to have cable, the airlines, and so I would have raved about them, said, oh, they're such a great company, and and for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a size thing. Maybe they get so big, and then the level of service that they give then just drops. But now they're kind of, a lot of people complain and say that it's not very good anymore. So I wonder if that's kind of maybe that's a scale thing. When a company gets so big, they don't feel the need anymore to chase customers with great customer service, I guess. I don't know.
Again, yeah, and again, that comes back to, that's why we need competition. And so many of these companies, in order to protect themselves and preserve themselves, they'll see a small competitor, an upstart, and they'll gobble them up and purchase them. Yeah. And then the consumers lose, because we really do need competition. We need companies that can say, oh, you're not going to offer that service? We will for the same price. You'll go with that other company. Yeah. That's one of my big complaints about Amazon is they really don't have another competitor. And they are slipping on their customer service now. So it'd be great if there was a competitor to Amazon that could be a little upstart and build the delivery system and online platform that they have.
And that's the problem, isn't it? To compete with these companies, that's the problem with monopolies. To compete with these companies, you're going to have a lot of financial backing to even consider competing against them. And who does have that? I don't know. I heard that Jeff Bezos is most likely going to become the first trillionaire potentially. So that's insane, isn't it? It's mad.
Yeah, well, I know. Which we're on that track. I mean, money. These numbers are getting so ridiculous now because they're so inflated that I almost feel like we really are in like this bubble right now. And at some point it has to burst because are we going to get to the point kind of like in Venezuela where you have to have a month's salary just to buy a piece of meat? Yeah. Like at some point our monetary system is just unsustainable. I'm a huge fan of the cryptos because I do think we are anyway going to move to some type of an electronic money system. And they're deflationary, at least Bitcoin is. So that's why I'm a huge advocate for cryptos.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Something needs to happen. It's I question sometimes is if the monetary system that we live in, if it's money that's the problem, maybe there's something else that could be done in a different way where actually money and materialism wasn't the be all and end all of our existence, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would love to see a system where maybe we did more bartering or, I mean, there is so much talk about a universal basic income right now, which, I coach people, who are just so unhappy in their jobs. And I just think, oh my God, if we had some type of a safety net like that where people didn't have, like, they still want to work, they still want to do something, they are just miserable at their current position, usually because of a bad manager, not because they hate the work itself. But if we could figure out a system where people could actually be doing work that they love, but they knew that the job was horrible and they can move to a different place that's better suited for them, but they would have that safety net, to me that would just transform the way that we work and live. So I don't know what that looks like because I'm very libertarian. I don't necessarily believe you can just pull money out of a hat and like just. Yeah. But we've got to figure out something because I coach people every week and they're just so unhappy in their jobs. Yeah. And it breaks my heart because I don't want someone to have a lifetime of, like you said, a 4-hour commute or having a manager who sucks or their life becomes total work. I would love to see that system changed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to almost end. It's really really pertinent. So I'm going to ask you just one last question for people watching. Is in your life? What was your moment or your experience? What was the one experience you've had that kind of was the experience for you? That either changed everything, or that you just look back and you just say that was a moment for me. That was really a moment.
So I don't know if it was just a particular moment, but I guess it was a moment when it happened. When I was 23, I had a mild traumatic brain injury, just as I was getting ready to graduate law school. Wow. And it knocked me out for 2 years, like where I knock out, not like literally passed out, but I fell off of a trampoline, and doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. This was still early in like knowing about concussions and the impact of them and all that. And finally I did find a doctor in Seattle who was able to help me. And I still to this day, many, many years later have some repercussions that I deal with because of that. But it really taught me a lot about, I went from graduating law school with honors to all of a sudden being just knocked flat on my butt to like not being able to do anything for a few years while I was in rehab and getting better. And I had to learn a lot about resilience, bouncing back, and being okay with bad things happening. And it's still a lesson that I'm learning, but that really did define me because it came at such a pivotal point in my life where I was getting ready to graduate law school and start my career. And I basically had to sit back and watch all my peers move on, and I was still trying to recover and get back in the game. I learned a lot during that time.
Did the fact that it was such a traumatic event, did that change your perspective on life in general? For how you were then going to move forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I've talked to people about it now, they say it's interesting. It kind of knocked you literally on a different path. Because at that point, I was going to go to Washington, D.C., wanted to work in the White House. That was very much my goal. And because of that happening, I ended up going down a different path where I was still working tangentially to politics. I was still kind of in that realm. But I actually ended up going to California, working there for a while, met interesting people. I had a whole different set of experiences than I would have had if I'd gone to the other side of the country. And so it really did teach me that I got kind of knocked in a different direction, but it's led me to where I am now. And who knows what would have happened if I hadn't had the brain injury and gone down a different path.
Yeah. Things happen for a reason, I think.
They do.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, excellent. Thank you very much, Meredith. And it's been a real pleasure, and it's been amazing talking to you. Really, really insightful. And I'd love to have you back again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to. This has been really fun. I've enjoyed having my drink with Chris.
Oh, what did you? Cheers. I didn't ask you, actually. To be honest with you, we got into it so quickly that I just thought, no, we're just going to run with it now because it's we're just going. So, is there anything that you'd like to promote? Have you got a website or a kind of social media or anything that you want people to go and visit if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, meredithturney.com, and I do have a newsletter that I send out twice a week, and I cover how to build a strong remote team, especially right now. It's really important for people. And then also I talk a lot about conscious leadership. So how can you be an awesome leader for your organization? Not just for people that are in management, but for anyone. We're all leaders. We lead ourselves. We lead our families. We lead our friends. Like, we're all leaders in our own little spheres. So my newsletter covers that. So that's a really good way to get to know me and my work. And if people are interested in coaching or anything like that, they can just reach out to me on my website.
Cool. Thank you very much. So you heard her. If you want to learn more about leadership, then please get on over to meredithturney.com. If you've got any comments about what we've been talking about today, please leave them in the comments. Subscribe to follow and see more videos of Drinks with Chris. And until the next time, take it easy. Excellent. Thank you very much.